if I can get the attention of all the die-hard participants who are still here when some of their colleagues have already abandoned you. I'm grateful for those who are present over here. I know we are fighting a long battle of fatigue, and maybe for some of us who are on jet lag, a bout of sleep. This being the last session of the day, but obviously there is always light at the end of the tunnel. We will have a wonderful evening today, so we look forward to that. But let me jump straight to the topic because we want to wrap it up within 1 hour. Issue of universality of the International Criminal Code in the Rome Statute obviously it lies at the core of the entire concept of the Rome Statute. The idea was to create a deterrence to the numerous atrocities being committed by the powerful against the powerless in every area of the world. The universality is important because we cannot live in two worlds. We cannot have the 123 countries which are now part of the ICC and the rest of them that are not. Because for us, a lot of times these atrocities and crimes take place either by or in the countries which are not part of the 123 Committee of Nations. Be it Ukraine, be it Kashmir, be it Myanmar, be it Syria, I can name many, many others. It's the same. The powerful versus the powerless. Until and unless we as a civilized world gather together and say enough is enough, and do it not with words, there are enough forums in the world which will keep on talking about it, but do it with concrete action. Do it by creating a deterrence. When a person commits an atrocity, he should have seen that there is a punishment that is attached to that. He should not merely take solace in the fact that he comes from a powerful country or from a powerful group or clan. That deterrence has to be universal. That deterrence has to instill the fear of God in every single person who ventures out to commit these kinds of atrocities anywhere in the world. So, for that, we need to have a true universality. Yes, I know, the real world is different. There used to be a term commonly used which said, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But today that can be extended. That every perpetrator of atrocities or war crimes feels that it's the other side that should be hauled in for doing this, but not them. They hide behind ideologies, they hide behind sovereignty, they hide behind sheer power. So we, as parliamentarians particularly, have to look within our own selves, within our own countries, within our own parliaments, and ensure that this becomes a universal fact and there is no immunity from it. So today I've got a whole group of experts and even more. We have got a Nobel Peace Prize winner this year on the panel. And I'm proud to be presiding this session where she is a participant, but also people who have been through every kind of situation. We heard our honorable member from Afghanistan sometime earlier. Today, right now, we will hear from 2 participants from Ukraine. So wherever you go, there is this problem. So let's go right into it. I'll start, of course, with Her Excellency Beth Van Schaak. She's the Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice in the U.S. State Department. She was unanimously approved in Congress lately, and why don't we hear some strong but words of wisdom from here.
Many thanks, Minister. I hope I won't disappoint. Thank you so much to the Parliamentarians for Global Action and everyone for inviting me here to this important gathering. Even though I am not a parliamentarian, I am a diplomat. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be on this esteemed panel with these colleagues and to engage in dialogue with all of you about the imperatives of international justice. We're in particular interested in hearing about a whole range of views on these issues because they are very important to the Biden-Harris administration. As the United States' 6th Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice, I am tasked with leading our government on a whole range of policies with respect to trying to prevent, mitigate, and respond to atrocities committed around the world. This includes genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, using a whole range of justice and accountability measures. I feel incredibly fortunate to be at the forefront of U.S. policy in this area, particularly in making sure that those who are most responsible for abuses are ultimately held to account, and that the United States plays a central role in ensuring that victims get access to the justice that they so rightly deserved. Now, as a diplomat and not a parliamentarian, I do enjoy engaging with our own members of Congress, and it was wonderful to hear one on the screen today, as they seek to strengthen the legislative framework within the United States devoted to preventing and responding to atrocities. For example, while the United States has laws devoted to a whole range of trafficking offenses, a whole range of terrorism offenses, the crime of genocide, the crime of torture, the crime of using child soldiers, we still lack a crimes against humanity statute, which many here have in their own penal codes. And we can exercise jurisdiction over war crimes only if either the perpetrator or the victim is a U.S. national. Now, there are proposals afoot within Congress to rectify both of these gaps. The hope is to better align our war crimes statute with our other international crimes statutes, which allow for the exercise of jurisdiction over perpetrators so long as they are present or found in the United States. So it's not full universal jurisdiction, as we may see elsewhere and around the world, but it is based upon the presence of a defendant in the United States. There was a hearing quite recently before our Senate to discuss proposals to rectify both of these gaps in our code, and the Biden-Harris administration has made clear that it supports both the enactment of a Crimes Against Humanity statute and expanding the jurisdictional grounds of our War Crimes Act. Now, turning to the International Criminal Court, this may come as no surprise that we are not a member of the court, but there are many ways that I think we as the United States, but also non-party states, can assist and advance the work of the court and the entire Rome Statute system. Importantly, early on, the Biden-Harris administration launched a reset of our relationship with the court. This involved acknowledging and addressing previous missteps. We started by terminating the sanctions that had been imposed upon members of the court, personnel, recognizing that these measures were inappropriate and should never have been put in place in the first place. At last year's Assembly of States Parties, the Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights affirmed the important role that the court plays in a system of international justice in the fight against impunity. Thus, when I assumed my post back in March, I inherited a clear mandate to continue to rebuild the US-ICC relationship. Since then, the United States has been engaging with all ICC stakeholders in an effort to help the court advance its core mission. We continue to look for ways to assist the court in a whole range of situations, including Darfur, the Central African Republic, Uganda, Libya, Venezuela, and we of course have welcomed the opening of the most recent investigation in Ukraine. On my first international trip as ambassador at large, I undertook an itinerary of great symbolic importance, starting in Nuremberg, moving through Brussels, Geneva, and then ending in The Hague. The goal was to convey the Biden-Harris administration's new approach to international justice efforts and to rebuild those relationships, not only with the court, but also with members of the assemblies of states parties, many of whom are here. In visits to The Hague, I have met with all of the various organs of the court, the judiciary, the registry, the prosecutor's office, etc., to express support for the court's work, announce our willingness to engage, and solicit ideas of what more we can do. Prosecutor Karim Khan completed his first official visit to Washington to meet with senior members of this administration, situation country experts within the State Department, and also members of Congress and their staff regarding our shared interest in justice. As we are convened here today, a bipartisan group of senators are in The Hague, also meeting with organs of the court to better understand the work of the court, its various organs, and to explore how the United States can assist. A member of my team recently attended a study tour organized by the Irish Embassy in The Hague to northern Uganda to understand and study the work of the Trust Fund for Victims there. To advance the work of the court, we are actively seeking to cooperate and assist in a range of situations, providing steady diplomatic support in multilateral fora, but also in our bilateral relationships. So, for example, when it comes to the Darfur cases, the United States welcomed the opening of recent proceedings against Ali Kushaib, a former Janjaweed commander, the first trial involving the administration of Omar al-Bashir and the genocide within Darfur. We continue to urge Sudanese officials to comply with their international obligations toward the court, to cooperate with the court, to provide assistance in a whole range of areas, including permitting ICC actors to travel freely and unfettered within the country, to cooperate with requests for evidence and other information and assistance, to offer unimpeded access to witnesses, and to facilitate an enhanced ICC field presence. We must insist that all those who are subject to arrest warrants by the ICC, including in the Sudan cases, ultimately face justice. As we are here in Argentina together, I want to note the strong contribution of states in this hemisphere to international justice efforts around the globe. In June, I represented the United States before the Organization of American States working meeting to strengthen cooperation with the ICC. At that time, I was able to announce the United States' support for the investigation in Venezuela, and also to acknowledge the way in which states of this region have contributed to the development of the whole range of mechanisms of transitional justice that can be employed in the aftermath of violence, repression, or armed conflict. The United States has also contemplated new referrals, given our role as a member of the Permanent Five of the Security Council. As Secretary Blinken announced in a statement marking the 5th anniversary of the Rohingya genocide in 2017, the United States would support a UN Security Council referral of the situation in Burma to the ICC. This is in line with the UN Security Council's mandate to promote international peace and security. To support the execution of ICC arrest warrants, we are reinvigorating our War Crimes Rewards program. This program offers rewards for information leading to the arrest, transfer, or conviction of individuals who have been indicted by an international or hybrid or national court. They have to be designated into the program, and they have to stand accused of committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide. In particular, with respect to the ICC, we have revitalized our reward offered for Joseph Kony, the head of the Lord's Resistance Army, but we also have rewards still available for the 4 remaining fugitives from the Rwanda Tribunal. We have found that the War Crimes Rewards Program is a valuable way to generate new information about the location of fugitives, and the Department of State continues to evaluate all situations in which offering rewards might further the imperative of accountability. Now, increasing the safety and well-being of witnesses is crucial to fostering a safe environment for individuals to testify before international courts, including the ICC. And one of my priorities as Ambassador-at-Large for Global Justice is to focus on the protection of victims and witnesses, including insider witnesses who might be willing to give testimony about how a particular repressive regime is operating. In partnership with the ICC Registry, the Argentine and Swiss embassies in The Hague, we will be co-hosting a side event during the next Assembly of States Parties to the International Criminal Court in The Hague in December, examining this question of witness protection and trying to generate fresh ideas about how to strengthen this system globally. This will include the thorny issue of how to protect insider witnesses, who may not have the most clean hands, but who may be able to provide critical testimony to hold those up the chain of command accountable. These are all examples about how a non-party state can assist the work of the ICC and engage constructively with all actors, including parliamentarians such as yourselves, who share the goal of ensuring that the ICC can deliver on its important mandate. Now, many of you may be wondering how the United States would view the ratification of the Rome Statute, for those of you that have not yet ratified. And so let me state clearly that the United States respects the right of every country to join the ICC. This has been a position across multiple U.S. administrations. We recognize that the ratification of any international treaty, including the Rome Statute, is a sovereign decision of all states, and we respect those decisions. And we are encouraged when states undertake commitments to promote justice and accountability for the crimes of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. We wholeheartedly share these underlying values and objectives. Now, while we have not made the decision ourselves to ratify the Rome Statute, and this would of course require congressional action, it would be a mistake to look to the ratification of the treaty as the sole test for our overarching commitment to justice and accountability. Now, in conclusion, while there's much happening on the international justice realm, it only scratches the surface of the acute needs, and much more needs to be done on the prevention side. Just as the Allies, after the Second World War, ushered in a new era of accountability for the worst imaginable crimes, it now falls to all of us to ensure that those responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and other atrocities in Ukraine and around the world are held to account. We must work together to ensure that the principles of justice championed at Nuremberg are not only maintained, but ultimately strengthened. As the world focuses on Ukraine, we cannot overlook the growing perception of many states, particularly from the global south, that this concerted action stands in stark exception to inconsistent and uneven responses to atrocities in other parts of the world. We must engage seriously with these perceptions of bias, of selective justice, of double standards, and all of us here must redouble our efforts to rectifying this reality and to work towards a more equitable distribution of justice for the Commission of International Crimes on behalf of all victims. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion, the events this evening, and the conference tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think your words would go well across the whole world when you actually welcome countries adopting the Rome Statute as state parties, because a lot of them perhaps were looking that as an excuse for not joining. Moving forward, let me go on from the United States to Guinea-Bissau, and Honorable João Pierre, who was a PGA head of the National Group and former Secretary of State for Transport and Telecommunication. Please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente, señor secretario general, distinguidos diputados. Es un honor dirigirme a ustedes hoy en el país de Che Guevara, Evita Perón, Diego Armando Maradona, para expresar algunas palabras sobre Messi. Messi. Para expresar algunas palabras sobre las oportunidades de promover la universalidad del Estatuto de Roma, trabajando activamente para que mi país, Guinea-Bissau, ratifique el Estatuto. Agradezco a los expertos que hablaron en los paneles anteriores y habernos brindado con un panorama muy completo, muy rico sobre los diferentes aspectos del sistema de Estatuto de Roma y cómo la universalidad y la implementación del Estatuto puede fortalecer el marco legal interno. Mr. Chairman, in West Africa, 13 out of 15 states are states party to the statute, which makes universality in West Africa almost a reality. Unfortunately, my country, Guinea-Bissau, is not yet a state party to the statute. We are yet to have the pertinent legislation in place to investigate and prosecute international crimes. As you might know, in May this year, the Parliament of Guinea-Bissau was dissolved and new parliamentary elections have been set for December 18, 2022. However, we have recently learned that due to logistical and financial challenges, the parliamentary elections will be pushed and held only in April 2023. Thus, the Parliament will resume its work in full force only after the parliamentary elections have taken place. Despite this scenario described above, my colleagues and I at the National Assembly stand ready to overcome past disagreements and work towards the ratification of the Rome Statute and its full implementation. We, as legislators, we understand that we are key actors and we have the primary responsibility and competence to deliberate on the ratification of international instruments as well as to consider, discuss, and adopt legislation to reinforce the domestic legal framework in accordance with the Constitution. One of the main pillars of the Rome Statute system is complementarity, which means that the states are primarily responsible for investigating and prosecuting international crimes. It is thus in my country's interest to ratify the Rome Statute and to fully implement it. In April this year, we had the privilege to receive in Guinea-Bissau the visit of the President of the International Criminal Court, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Hoffmansky met with the country's highest authorities to encourage the ratification of the Rome Statute. To me, this was an extraordinary visit and a timely visit, and soon we will reap the harvest. The parliamentarians of Guinea-Bissau are committed to the rule of law, peace, and security, and it will ensure that the ICC is truly universal by removing legal and political obstacles to the ratification process in the country. However, we acknowledge that to achieve such ratification as other Lusophone countries, such as Brazil, Cabo Verde, and Portugal, Guinea-Bissau should consider to start a procedure towards a modest constitutional amendment, which is, according to the Article 127 of the Constitution, a prerogative of the National Assembly. In this respect, the Constitution of Guinea-Bissau appears to have a similar provision to the Constitution of Brazil, namely the prohibition to extradite nationals abroad. But this prohibition should not be interpreted as a main problem to join the ICC system, essentially for two reasons. First, if the ICC may need to request the transfer or surrender of Bissau-Guinea nationals, Guinea-Bissau will not be requested to extradite them to the ICC, but just to temporarily transfer them to the purpose of trial proceedings in The Hague, which means that the same individuals may retransfer back to Bissau. Two, the ICC jurisdiction is only complementary to the jurisdiction of the state parties. In this respect, we should use the opportunity of the external stimulus represented by the possibility of an ICC intervention to make sure that its judicial system will be reinforced to the point that it will be able to prevent and counter impunity in the future, should international crimes be committed in Guinea-Bissau or by our nations. My country, by doing so, we will provide to our people a guarantee of never again, in respect of the perpetration of atrocity crimes, we will have honored our legislative mandate in the service of the rights and best interests of our people. My colleagues and I, with the technical assistance of PGA, will work after the parliamentary elections on an amendment proposal which will help galvanize colleagues and foster political will to come to a multi-party agreement around specific and tailored amendments. This protection of human rights and strengthening of rule of law is not a partisan matter. It benefits us all and humanity at large. We believe that it is time for Guinea-Bissau to participate actively in the prevention of international crimes by ratifying the Rome Statute and by having the necessary domestic legal tools to investigate and prosecute said crimes by implementing the statute. I can guarantee you in Buenos Aires that Guinea-Bissau will take those steps. We will be a state party of the statute. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I will quickly move on now to Dr. Angela Burke-Brown, Member of Parliament from Jamaica. She's chairperson of People's National Party, former Deputy President of the Senate, and former Mayor of Kingston. Please.
Thank you very much, Minister. Muy buenos días a todos y a todas. Bonne journée à tous. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Doy las gracias a la Asamblea Nacional de Argentina y a la Presidenta Casturi, al Secretario David del PGA y los demás organizadores de este evento. En realidad es un gran honor mío hablar ante este grupo internacional de colegas sobre la universalidad y la ampliación de la Corte Criminal Internacional. You would believe that, that's it, right? Allow me to begin with some famous words, really first uttered by Marcus Garvey and made popular by Bob Marley. Until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, everywhere is war. Well, we are here today because that has been so, but we want to take some steps towards removing that. My country, Jamaica, signed the Rome Statute in 2000, 22 years ago, but has yet to ratify it. It therefore remains one of the few countries in CARICOM which has not yet become a member of the state party to the ICC. Why is this the case? For Jamaica, a country long before independence, who had levied sanctions against South Africa and refused to do business. Well, it could be explained by the close relations between the US and Jamaica and the volatile relationship between the US and the ICC. Granted, Ambassador has spoken earlier about some significant changes that sound like music to the ear. And this was so really, especially under the previous Trump administration, where the US adopted a very hostile approach towards the ICC and imposed sanctions on the ICC officials, and any step towards ratification would have been unthinkable. And we welcome the changes announced just now by Ambassador. This significant change by the Biden-Harris administration is really welcome. And I'm therefore hopeful that this will create a much more positive prospect towards ratification for Jamaica. The importance of becoming a part of the ICC system is clear. The ratification of the Rome Statute is a precondition for the accomplishment of the goal of international criminal justice to ensure that perpetrators of grave international crimes are brought to justice. The ICC is an institution committed to credible justice. Its goals are, most importantly, to put an end to impunity, to render justice and the rights of victims, and to contribute to international peace and security. Being a part of the ICC has served to demonstrate and to deter international crimes as well as armed conflict. Ratifying and implementing the Rome Statute, therefore, enhances domestic and international rule of law and brings peace and stability to the country and the region. I am very aware that to ensure that no individual is truly above the law and fulfill its mandate, the Rome Statute of the ICC must be ratified universally. Given that the automatic jurisdiction of the ICC applies to genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes only in respect of acts committed either within territories of the state parties to the treaty or for nationals of these state parties, regardless of the geographic location of their conduct, only universal ratification of the Rome Statute can bring about universal jurisdiction of the ICC and provide justice to victims. As such, together with my Jamaican colleagues, I will keep working towards ensuring that Jamaica first implements the implementing legislation and then proceed to ratifying the statute. The precondition, of course, for Jamaica is the adoption of the implementing legislation by Parliament. Without this implementing legislation enacted by Parliament, the Jamaican executive cannot ratify the Rome Statute. Once the legislation is enacted, the ratification can then be done by an executive decision with adoption from the government. So far, our domestic legislation does not include any of the crimes or general principles under the Rome Statute, and so that too would be outstanding. The drafting of domestic legislation, which would allow Jamaica to join the Rome Statute, was at an advanced state in 2015 and was planned to be placed on the agenda by the end of 2015 itself. Back then, the Justice Minister, the current leader of opposition, indicated that legislation was being fast-tracked to facilitate Jamaica's accession to the ICC. However, due to other legislative priorities and limited resources at the Legislative Committee, the process was not finalized. After Jamaica's general elections in February 2016 and a change in government, the draft implementing legislation was transmitted by the previous executive to the Legislative Committee within Parliament, but it still remains one of the priorities to be addressed. In February 2017, the then Foreign Minister said that Jamaica would be proceeding with ratification to the Rome Statute without specifying a timeline. Quite frankly, I believe, though we cannot count on the US ratifying the statute, that the present more accommodating narrative coming out of the US will certainly make it easier to move forward. In Jamaica, we say that the US sneezes and Jamaica catches a cold. So there you go. Another factor that presents an opportunity, I believe, is a more interested public, given the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Who would have thought that Jamaica would have had to deal with the issue of ensuring the safe return of our students studying in the universities of Ukraine? So that has brought the conflict a little closer to home for many of us. And what that means is that it provides an opportunity and an environment for greater public education and an interest in those issues. All of these realities, I believe, now make it an ideal time to remind and encourage the government to revive the existing implementing legislation, to revise it, and to send it to the Parliament for adoption. As opposition member, I acknowledge the importance of working with the minister, newly created post, the Minister of Constitutional and Legal Affairs. I also believe that we have an excellent opportunity with two members of the Jamaican delegation here, one from the government and one from the Parliament, and we do see eye to eye on this particular matter. There aren't many other issues around which we work or collaborate willingly as a two-party democracy, but I believe that this could be one of the few. Based on the discussions today, it's also clear that we can also look to other countries and the PGA for similar legislation from which we can draw. After the ratification is subject to the decision, as I said earlier, an act of the executive. And I have no doubt that we will be able to count on and enlighten the Jamaican public, the conviction of both of us here being able to collaborate in Parliament, and certainly a government with far less to fear in our accession to the ICC, given the current U.S. position. So I leave here today a little bit more enthused than when I came, that going back home, we have a real chance of moving it forward. Blessings y muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now we shift the focus to Ukraine, which we have been discussing all day, but now to hear it directly from the horse's mouth. I call upon our Deputy Head of the Parliamentary Committee on Law Enforcement and a PGA member, Dr. Galina Mayhaluk. Sorry, I've suffered being mispronounced all my life. So.
Me too.
Over to you.
Esteemed participants of the 12th Consultative Assembly for Parliamentarians for International Criminal Court and Rule of Law, distinguished colleagues, first and foremost, let me take this opportunity to express my immense gratitude to our international partners for all the solidarity and stand for Ukraine, for our fight for freedom and democratic values. We are all keenly aware that on 24th of February, 8 months ago, Russia has launched a full-scale war in Ukraine using ground forces, aircraft, missile systems, phosphorus bombs, different kinds of ammunition that is prohibited by international law, raping and killing civilians, including children. We could not even imagine that the price for our aspirations for freedom and democracy in Europe will be so high that Ukrainians will pay with their lives. Experiencing the horrors of the biggest tragedy starting from the Second World War, in this light, we Ukrainians truly appreciate and commend all of our international allies, their clear stand and support. This is invaluable efforts for us Ukrainians. The key priorities for us remain the same. This is military and humanitarian assistance, tightening sanctions to the fullest possible extent against Russia, further isolation of Russia, gathering evidence and prosecution Russian war crimes. And indeed, we understand that the country's progressive approach on this issue, as well as attempts to avoid the circumvention of sanctions. Nevertheless, the time is of utmost importance for Ukrainians. We must promptly cut off all possible resources which enable Kremlin to finance this war. Furthermore, we are all tragically aware that Russian forces, they are committing war crimes on our territory against humanity. And monitoring evidence of their actions indicates the gravity and the scale of the blatant violations of international law that are committed on the Ukraine. The siege tactics preventing humanitarian convoys from entering Ukrainian cities have been used to starve civilians and surrender Ukrainians, to force them to flee as refugees to other countries. In the areas that are freed from Russian control, we have been numerous deliberate killings of civilians, mass graves found where there are feet and hands bound, summary executions, torture, rape, and sexual assault of Ukrainians. If the aggressor is not held accountable for these appalling crimes against Ukrainian people, it risks undermining the credibility of international law and rule-based order altogether. Domestically, Ukrainian authorities do their best primarily to investigate the crimes and prosecute violations of international law that are committed on the territory of sovereign Ukraine. From the very first day of full-scale war, Ukrainian law enforcement agencies have documented, the national police in particular, they have documented 95% of all the crimes. As of November, the Prosecutor General Office has already launched more than 42,000 of crimes, recorded more than 42 times of crimes on aggression and war crimes, and more than 80,000 of crimes against national security. To this extent, we as legislators of Ukraine, we do our best to provide all possible legislative database for the law enforcement agencies to be effective and act quick on the ground. We continue our work as parliamentarians. We never stopped. There was only 1 week of break when the invasion started, and yesterday, the parliament was having our sessions, and we do our best to bring all possible legislation to make the effective prosecution of the war crimes committed on the territory of Ukraine. Taking this into account, I should say that starting from the 24th of February, 95 draft laws were registered in the Parliament of Ukraine. 50 of them are already adopted and became laws. And one of the crucial initiatives that was drafted by the Law Enforcement Committee and adopted was the law on ensuring cooperation with the ICC and Criminal Procedure Code of Ukraine. Another aspect of parliamentarian work is regular interactions with the National Police, General Prosecutor's Office, National Guard, Bodyguard Services, National Bureau of Investigations, and other law enforcement agencies. And particularly, it highlights within the established working groups and close cooperation on legislative drafting process, joint analysis and monitoring of the implementation and the effectiveness of the adopted laws. Furthermore, the Committee on the Law Enforcement pays special attention to the international ties and creating opportunities for the comprehensive exchange of legislative expertise, highly specialized experience and best practices that we constantly develop, the fruitful cooperation with the respective counterparts in various European and international institutions. However, given the scale of the atrocities that were committed on the territory of Ukraine, the challenge is that domestically prosecution is not enough. Internationally, we still do not have an institutional basis to hold Russian political and military leadership accountable for the crimes against aggression. Therefore, Ukrainian parliament, together with the law enforcement agencies, is building a support network. And the main purpose is to engage the foreign teams, reinforced with experts that are specializing in the investigation of international crimes, conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence, victim rights, and forensic expertise on complex crime scenes, weapons, ammunition, and explosives. Initiating the specialized training programs related to the investigation of atrocity crimes seems no less significant in this regard. Following the decades seeking to ensure the inevitability of punishment to war criminals, the International Criminal Court was established, and indeed Ukraine fully supports its initiatives, accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC over the events in our territory, and we introduced the changes into Ukrainian legislation to simplify and make our cooperation with this court more effective. Therefore, there is a constant and quite practical communication with representatives of International Criminal Court on all levels of expertise in order to achieve the common goal for bringing the Russian occupiers to justice for the crimes committed in Ukraine. But for the regional crime of aggression to receive a fair answer as well, we must supplement the activities of International Criminal Court. A special tribunal should be established for the crime of aggression against Ukraine, punishing those who unfortunately cannot be reached by International Criminal Court and other available judicial institutions all over the world. The very fact of preparing indictments and issuing arrest warrants for those who planned and ordered the beginning of this aggression will be the most powerful signal for the other potential aggressors in the world that the war is inevitably punished and the guilty held liable. The law should always prevail. The humanity is guaranteed to be protected. Thus, we urge everyone to participate in the establishment of appropriate legal institutions to contribute to the long-term peace in Europe and the world. Let the law prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last person on the panel is Alexandra Metvecha. She is the chairperson of the Center for Civil Liberties of Ukraine, and of course, the Nobel Peace Prize winner for the year 2022. Let us welcome her.
Thank you very much for providing me the floor. It's a huge honor for me to speak here. I'm a human rights lawyer. I have been spent 20 years for defending human rights and human dignity, and 8 of them I have been documenting war crimes, because this war, which Russia launched, started not in February 2022, but in February 2014. And this is not a Ukrainian crisis. This is a war which was started by Russia. After large-scale invasion, we united several dozens of regional organizations into a Tribunal for Putin initiative. We built all Ukrainian networks of local documentators to document war crimes. And working together, only in 8 months of Russian aggression, we have documented 21,000 episodes of war crimes. 21,000 episodes of war crimes is a huge number, but it's only a tip of iceberg. But it still provides us opportunity to make several conclusions. First, Russia uses war crimes as the methods of warfare. Russia tried to break people's resistance and occupy the country by the tool which I call the immense pain of civilian population. There is no justifications for Russian actions. There is no legitimate purpose to force people to go down to the basement, to tell them to appoint 8 volunteers, and no purpose in shooting them. There is no purpose in using tanks just for fun, firing people on the bicycles whose bodies lay scattered around the streets until liberation of Bucha. There is no purpose in breaking someone's house, killing the owner, and rape the mother next to her child. There is no purpose in shooting a 40-year-old boy in a close range who just playing with the ball in the yard. There is no military purpose in doing such horrible things. Russians have done this because they could. So, second conclusion, all this hell which we're going on in Ukraine, it's result of total impunity which Russia enjoyed for decades. Because Russian troops for decades committed war crimes in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world. They have never been punished for this. They have avoided responsibility even for using chemical weapons against civilians in Syria. They believe they could do whatever they wanted. So we must break the circle of impunity. And the third conclusion, how to do it? Ukrainian national legal system is overloaded with an extreme amount of crimes. I will be honest, the best office of prosecutor in the world couldn't effectively investigate more than 30,000 criminal proceedings effectively during the war. We need international support in order to achieve this goal. And first, I will speak about International Criminal Court. Our organization, together with other human rights defenders, started a campaign of ratification of Rome Statute 8 years ago. This campaign resulted that Ukrainian parliament sent 2 declarations to ICC in 2014 and 2015. And ICC decided to open a preliminary examination. Then jointly, with the support of parliamentarians of Global Action, we managed to convince Ukrainian parliament to change Ukrainian constitution and open the way to ratification of Rome Statute. But it still haven't ratified yet. I do hope that it will happen soon. But ICC and its action is extremely important, but we all know that it selects their investigation only to several cases. And this is a question for me, as a human rights lawyer, how I can guarantee the justice or even chance for justice to all other victims of war crimes who will not be selected by International Criminal Court. And this means that we need to go further, that we need to establish a complex justice strategy, which includes different components. How to strengthen the ability of International Criminal Court and Ukraine has to do the home task and ratify Rome Statute. How to increase potential of national legal systems. Because we need qualified people on the ground, not only international consultants. A lot of things we couldn't do, not because we don't know about what we have to do, but because we lack of qualified working hands. There are numerous atrocities which has to be investigated. Third component, how to use a potential of universal jurisdiction in different countries. And we need your support as parliamentarians in your country, how you can assist us in it. And also, I support my colleague, Ukrainian MP Halina Mikhailuk, who told that we need to establish a new additional international mechanisms. And we speak about international tribunal to hold Putin, Lukashenko, and other war criminals accountable. And I will finish my speech with my personal reflection, because I work with victims directly, and I know for sure that they need to restore not only their broken lives, broken families, broken vision of the future. They need to restore their belief that justice exists, even though delayed in time. And this means that we have changed the approach to war crime justice. We need to guarantee justice to all victims, regardless of who they are, what is their social position, what types of crime they endured, or whether or not media is interested in their cases. Because life of each person matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we'll hear more from you later this evening at the Defender of Democracy Award. I think I'll keep up with the tradition of not allowing an open debate from the floor that we have followed all day, and hand the mic over to David for his concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Navid. And yes, it's almost 5 o'clock and it's a time to finish, but I really would like for you to think about questions to be discussed tomorrow, because we will have the expert in this panel and the distinguished parliamentarians with us. My only summary of the day is that the way Alexandra concluded it, that we need justice for all, connects with the first speech of this afternoon, Minut Tavares Mirabal, when she said we need guarantees of non-repetition, nunca más, nunca jamás, for all. So, and it's an enormous task. So, of course, the ICC is only one component of this design, but listening from states that didn't join yet, that they are ready to join in terms of their parliamentary action, at least, not yet the executive, from Guinea-Bissau, Jamaica, and hopefully also Ukraine, and maybe, why not, and here I quote the last CAP-ICC, Beth, if you allow me, because she is a PJ member, I'm entitled to do so, Mr. Jim McGovern, when Senator Boris Dietrich hosted the CAP-ICC online in 2020 during the pandemic, promoted and supported the idea that the US should ratify the Rome Statute. That statement is online, and is the co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, so he's not, one sidelined MP. He's a very important Congress member. But what we are here for is also to ensure that this system is viable and workable. So tomorrow we will discuss further on matters of how the court can be supported. We heard expert input from Justice Richard Goldstone and the leaders of the court this morning. They gave us so much input. It's not our role to solve all the problems, but at least some ideas could maybe tomorrow be discussed and put forward. For example, one idea was circulated and ventilated and was initiated many years ago by our treasurer, Petra Bayer, but I heard also another board member speaking about this, which there should be some publicity in the form of recruitment of the judges, some of the want to be nominated, not to be elected, of course, that's the prerogative of the executives. And there could be other improvements in the system that are being worked out. And to conclude, breaking the cycle of impunity is really a societal commitment. Every component of society must be engaged: civil society, parliament, the executive, the judiciary, of course. And this is not a task that we alone can achieve, but I think this morning we heard from the prosecutor online, we heard from the President of the Assembly, we heard from the President of the ICC, that this project, the Consultative Assembly of Parliamentarians on the ICC and the rule of law, is a worthwhile project. And let me tell you in my personal view why. Because this is a court, it's a very important court without police, without law enforcement, because you depend on state cooperation, but also without parliament. There is no parliament discussing or adopting the budget of the court. And in fact, they have a lot of problems with the states that don't want to increase the budget. Because in your system, if there is a big crime wave and you need more money for judges and prosecutors and police, you appropriate that money, because justice costs what it costs. But at the ICC, it's opposite. The states, they want to fill them in one box, like every other international organization, and it cannot cost more than X. And I think this is not really functioning well. So there are a lot of challenges in the system, and I think having some sort of parliamentary body that works with the court is something that PJ will continue to do so